I say to you, Mr Speaker.
Listening on as his fate was debated, surrounded by colleagues Owen Paterson had sat beside for 24 years, and a plan backed by the Prime Minister.
Thanks to the effort of my colleagues and the government, we now have a chance to build a proper system based on the rules of natural justice.
That natural justice replaced less than 24 hours later with a farewell to the, quote, cruel world of politics, as, with much sadness, the former cabinet minister resigned. For 5 years, Mr Paterson earned more than £100,000 a year on top of his MP salary by consulting for 2 firms. Last week, the Parliamentary Standards Committee ruled he had lobbied for these firms in a, quote, egregious case of paid advocacy. Yesterday, instead of voting on whether to suspend Mr Paterson from Parliament, MPs were voting on whether to overhaul the investigations process.
The issue in this case is whether a member of this House had a fair opportunity to make representations in this case, or whether as a matter of natural justice, our procedures in this House allow for proper appeal.
The ayes to the right, 250.
This Conservative plan may have won yesterday's battle, but it began a war that they would lose in less than a day.
Do you not feel even a tiny bit grubby doing this?
I really don't.
The case of Owen Paterson really highlighted this sort of anomaly.
But just 2 hours later this morning, a U-turn on a supposed cross-party solution to standards investigations that had no cross-party support.
Therefore, I and others will be looking to work on a cross-party basis to achieve improvements in our system for future cases.
And if there was any doubt this was a U-turn, this. Last night, Junior Minister Angela Richardson tweeting she'd been fired for not voting with the government. This morning, reinstated. Yesterday, 248 MPs came through here and voted for a plan backed by the Prime Minister. Many of them told us they weren't comfortable with it and they knew it would look bad to the outside world. Tonight, there is anger, particularly among the newer 2019 intake of Tory MPs, some of whom have told us that they held their noses and voted reluctantly because the party machine told them they had to. One MP told us they received a week's worth of angry emails in just one night.
Well, my office, unfortunately, was vandalised this morning. Tory sleeves painted all over it.
The fallout was foreseeable, says this veteran MP, which is why he wanted a change to how investigations are handled, but says it was foolish to link it to Owen Paterson's case.
It's not been a great 24 hours for the government because, unfortunately, they laid a motion in the House of Commons that conflated 2 things and asked MPs to vote on it, and that was not right. We should have dealt with the case of Mr Owen Paterson first and then sought cross-party support for reforming the system.
Owen Paterson strenuously denies any wrongdoing and says he always acted with integrity. Some in his North Shropshire constituency today disagree.
I've just heard today that he's resigned and I'm very pleased about it.
Why are you pleased about it?
Well, I think it should be fair ruling, not one rule for one and one for another. I think what he did was underhanded and it shouldn't be overlooked.
I'm not Conservative. I vote for Labour, to be honest, but he's a good man.
It's not responsible, it's not fair with you know, he's supposed to be running a constituency and it's not okay. You know, to be creaming money from elsewhere whilst he's getting paid for doing one job. It's not okay.
In less than 24 hours, the sun set on a political career that lasted 24 years. The damage to Owen Paterson's career has been terminal. The bigger question, what impact for the party and the Prime Minister that backed him?
Well, shortly before we came on air, I spoke to the former Conservative Deputy Prime Minister, Lord Heseltine. I began by asking him how much damage he thinks has been done to the party over the past 24 hours.
This is a terrible event. It's a human tragedy for Owen and, of course, his late wife, his family. But it is also at the heart of the accountability of parliamentary democracy. And the standards that we have got to ensure are preserved if public respect is to be maintained.
But there are 2 issues in play here. I mean, one is that of an MP taking money to lobby on behalf of 2 corporations. And the other, of course, is the attempt to ignore the parliamentary commissioner in her findings.
Well, we cannot possibly defend the use of parliamentary privilege for personal gain. That is something that is of critical importance that we do not tolerate if we are to maintain the respect of parliamentary government. The reputation of members of parliament is an essential feature of the quality of our constitution. The only question now is what next? And the critical thing is to have a system of scrutiny which commands respect within Parliament, across the parliamentary divides, and in the wider British public.
Well, now you've been, at the top of British politics for a very long time. How much damage do you think this has done the party?
It will certainly have done a considerable amount of short-term damage. But in the end, when you get to general elections, basically the management of the economy, people's sense of well-being, is what determines defeat or return of the existing government. And we're quite a long way off the general election. So I think it would be inaccurate to say that this will be a defining moment for the general election. But it's certainly in the short term a damaging event. And
Boris Johnson is safe as Prime Minister?
I think that he's got these appalling dilemmas facing him. The effects of COVID, the disaster of Brexit, and the responsibilities for the environmental challenges which are being thrashed out in Glasgow. I don't think it's conceivable that a British Prime Minister should disappear in the context of these three enormous challenges.
Lord Heseltine, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Well, I've been speaking with the former chairman of the Committee on Standards in Public Life, Sir Alistair Graham. I asked him how much damage has been done to the reputation of Parliament.
Well, we'll have to see, but I'm sure there's been considerable damage to the reputation of the Prime Minister in the way that this issue has been so badly handled. And I think a large number of Conservative MPs must be terribly upset in the way they've been led up a hill and back down again.
You were chairman of the Commission on Standards in Public Life. What do you make of the way the incumbent in the House of Commons has performed?
My own view of Catherine's approach to standards is that she's rather cautious and will only proceed if the evidence supports proceeding in a particular way. So it looked like a complicated and nasty manoeuvre to try and get rid of her and get rid of the standard system.
Is there not now a genuine need for a complete overhaul in the way this all works?
Well, the obvious conclusion that you might have of this current scandal is that you should take disciplinary matters away from members in Parliament and have it dealt with by an outside body in the way that doctors, accountants, and a whole range of other professional people have their disciplinary matters dealt with. I suspect in reality there will not be any dramatic changes to the existing system. And of course, I'm not sure that Johnson was terribly worried about that.
Sir Alistair Graham, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.